She licked Merlot off her front teeth like it was blood from a fresh kill, leaned back in the leather chair I'd re-upholstered last spring, and said it like a joke. "You'll crawl back. They always do." The fire cracked once. I remember that sound because it was the only thing that didn't make me want to vomit. Her legs were crossed high. She always did that when she wanted to feel taller, more in control. She kept swirling her glass with the smug certainty of someone who believed nothing bad could happen to her, because it never had. She'd never felt cold concrete under her back. Never stared at a ceiling fan in a rental wondering how the hell things got this bad. Not like I had. "You're not mad, are you?" she added, eyes still fixed on the flames. "I just think you should prepare yourself. I'm not going to be your plan B." I didn't answer. I was staring at the stupid little painting above the mantel. She picked it out, a watercolor of a vineyard, supposedly from some no-name French artist she found in Santa Fe. She said it gave the room an old-money feel. What it gave me was a reminder. The vineyard was mine once, too. So was the room, and the house, and the 5 acres surrounding it. "You know," she continued, "Derek begged me to move to California with him 2 years ago. I said no because I thought you'd grow up. But lately, I wonder if I should have gone." She took a long sip. "Maybe I'm too nice for my own good." The part that got me wasn't the Derek comment. She'd always had a Derek, and a Kyle, and before them, a Brandon with a jaw like a movie villain and a job that mysteriously never had a paycheck. No, the part that hit like a knee to the stomach was what she said next. "I don't even think you'd fight me for the house. Not really. You're too practical. You'll let me keep it and rebuild somewhere smaller, more sensible." She grinned. "I mean, we both know you love the idea of disappearing and starting over. You practically fetishize it." That's when I stood up. Slowly. I wasn't angry yet. Just hollow. Like something had left the room and taken the air with it. I left my glass untouched on the table. She laughed softly when I grabbed my phone. "Oh, please," she said. "What? You're calling your lawyer? Don't bother. Mine's already seen the prenup and the trust documents. There's nothing in there that gives you leverage, darling. You were trying to be fair, remember?" She winked. "That's why I married you. You always wanted things to be fair." I nodded once. Not out of agreement, but out of muscle memory. Then I walked out of the room and down the hall, into the study, and locked the door behind me. The wine bottle on her side of the coffee table had 3 fingers left. Same amount I used to pour for my father when I was a kid, before he'd sit at the kitchen table, rub his forehead, and ask my mom why people only remember who builds the house after it burns down. She didn't look up when I closed the study door. She thought this was just another one of my quiet reactions. She always confused my silence for compliance. She mistook my lack of confrontation for fear. What she never understood was that I didn't argue because I had already finished the conversation. I'd had it in my head 1,000 times. And in every version, she ended up standing outside a gate that no longer opened for her. In the study, I stood in front of the safe for a few seconds. Not thinking, just listening. The fire was still crackling faintly down the hall. Her voice carried. She was on the phone now, laughing, probably with that plastic-faced friend of hers who once told me I had the energy of an accountant. I keyed in the code. Behind the thick steel door was a binder. Just one. White. Boring. No title. Inside, the entire structure of Parallax Holdings and the trust she'd signed during our first year of marriage. She didn't remember that night. She had been drunk on limoncello and ambition, nodding at the notary and texting her sister during the signing. Just legal fluff, she'd called it. I remembered because I'd written that exact phrase into the margin next to her signature. Underlined it. Dated it. I turned to the first page, and there it was. A sentence I'd written with ice in my blood and a lawyer who charged 4 digits an hour to be my pen. In the event of divorce initiated by the spouse, all assets held within shall revert to holding entity X within 24 hours. The house, the land, the guest properties, the licensing rights for our shared retreats, even the mineral rights under the hillside she liked to jog along, because that was technically part of the parcel. She'd laughed at the language. "That's your department," she said. "Just don't bore me with the details." It wasn't about boring her. It was about burying the truth in plain sight, under a mountain of clauses, subclauses, and legal grammar she would never care to learn. She didn't read. She skimmed. And skimming is how you miss the floor disappearing under your feet. I didn't hesitate. I picked up the phone and made the call. The lawyer answered on the second ring, his voice groggy but alert. "It's time," I said. "Page 1, he asked. "Page 1. There was a kind of peace in the quiet weight of that binder, an eerie, surgical kind of peace, like the moment before anesthesia kicks in. No adrenaline, no tremor in my hands, just silence, and the knowledge that a war had been declared by someone who didn't know they'd stepped into a minefield. Page 1 wasn't long. That was the point. We designed it that way, clean, brutal, unmistakable. No loopholes. No wiggle room. It started with the clause I had read at least 100 times, memorized like a quiet prayer. In the event of divorce initiated by the spouse, all assets held within shall revert to holding entity X within 24 hours. No need for a judge. No need for a trial. The structure was airtight, formed under Delaware Series LLC protections, subdivided into property-specific holding silos, and backstopped with irrevocable executor privileges assigned to me. She had no idea. She never asked. Never cared. I remember the day she signed it. We were still us, back then, or at least I thought so. She wore this silky navy blouse that day. Something she said made her feel boardroom ready. She twirled a pen between her fingers while the notary reviewed the document. "You realize I'm just signing a giant pile of fluff, right?" she'd said, glancing at the pages without actually reading them. "Legal fluff. This is like insurance for your paranoia." I had smiled. "Exactly," I said. "Just insurance." She clinked her glass against mine later that night and said, "See? Now we're bulletproof." What she didn't know then, what she never took the time to understand, was that she'd signed away every soft place she thought she could land. Not out of cruelty, out of necessity, because I knew her. I knew the cycles, the history, the way she calculated escape routes even during good times. I loved her once, and maybe that was the most dangerous part, because loving her meant preparing for the moment she'd weaponize everything I'd built. The phone buzzed once. "Private line." I answered. "Midnight Protocol?" asked the voice on the other end. "Yes," I said. "Midnight Protocol. Page 1 is live. Timestamp. 11:48 p.m. There was a pause, then a quiet, "Copy that." The line went dead. I sat back and exhaled. In 24 hours, the house would no longer belong to either of us. The land wouldn't either. It would all exist in a different layer now, under holding entity X, which, despite its deliberately generic name, was as real as any bulldozer or eviction notice. The control documents were already in escrow. The licensing rights she bragged about to her Pilates friends? Transferred. The guest homes she listed on luxury travel blogs as our investment gems? Gone. And I hadn't even broken a sweat. I remember glancing at the fireplace down the hall. Her laughter floated in again, louder now, careless. Probably reliving some past victory, probably savoring the setup she thought she was still in control of. I walked to the bar cart in the study and poured a single shot of scotch. Just one. The bottle hadn't been touched in over a year. That was another thing about her. She didn't notice what stayed untouched. It wasn't until I looked down at the coaster I placed the glass on that something clicked. A stupid little detail, but important. It had a quote etched into the leather. "Risk comes from not knowing what you're doing." Buffett said that. She hated that quote. Said it was arrogant old man wisdom. Said it made her feel judged. I used to laugh that off. Now I just stared at the coaster and realized that quote wasn't a judgment. It was a mirror. She'd triggered the clause by filing first. Her lawyer had probably smiled while submitting the paperwork, thinking it was a victory. Thinking it was the start of a long, drawn-out negotiation where they could chip away at the estate, threaten public exposure, maybe even smear me into settling quietly. But page 1 didn't care about leverage. It didn't care about PR. It only cared about the order of initiation. That was the trick. That was the entire play. She could have waited. She could have asked. But she filed. Early, proudly, laughing at the fire with her wine and her memories of men who crawled back. My lawyer texted a single word, "Confirmed." I took another sip of scotch. The walls of the study didn't feel like mine anymore. And that was fine. That was the plan. Outside, the wind picked up. The gate sensors were programmed to disable remote access at midnight sharp. The title transfer had already been submitted to the county registry, and the escrow team, flawlessly, precisely, was now holding the keys. The foundation of her illusion had been reset. Not with anger, not with vengeance, but with paperwork and patience. Let her sleep soundly tonight. Let her dream of court victories and spa-day consultations with friends who totally support her. Let her believe she's still 10 moves ahead. Because tomorrow morning, at exactly 6:07 a.m., her father will call. And when he does, his voice will shake. And she will finally understand what page 1 really meant. Her ringtone was some irritating remix of a 2000s pop song she swore was nostalgic, but that morning it sounded like a fire alarm. She rolled over in bed, squinting at the screen. "Dad," it said. She smirked as she tapped the green circle. "Calling to congratulate me on my freedom?" she teased, still half asleep. But his voice, she told me this later, didn't match her fantasy. Page 1, he activated it. What? Get your things and get out now. Get out. She sat upright, hair a mess, heartbeats slamming through her chest. What the hell are you talking about? The trust. The clause. Page 1. It's live. The timestamp shows 4:01. Everything's moving, everything. You don't have access anymore. We checked. She swung her legs out of bed, still not entirely awake. Dad, what are you? Wait, slow down. You checked. He cursed. Loudly. Something she hadn't heard him do since her senior year of college. The goddamn land titles, your house, the guest homes, everything. It's all under Parallax Holdings now. That clause you laughed at. It wasn't fluff. She was fully awake now, heart in her throat. She ran to the kitchen, bare feet hitting cold marble tile. Her laptop was already open from the night before. She'd been browsing vacations to Tulum, post-divorce healing retreats. She clicked into our shared portal, the one tied to the luxury property licenses. She was still logged in, but the dashboard was different. No active listings under this profile, it read. She refreshed. Again. Then it logged her out. Wrong password, it said. Attempted login flagged. Contact system administrator. She slammed the lid down and ran to the hallway. No, this isn't funny. Her voice cracked. Not rage yet. Not even fear. Just confusion. Raw, paralyzing confusion. The kind you feel when the GPS glitches and suddenly you're not sure where the road is. She grabbed her phone. Try to call me. Straight to voicemail. Dad, I can't. Get your things, he snapped. You're on the clock. It's a 24-hour trigger. That house isn't yours anymore. She looked around the kitchen, the place she bragged about designing from scratch, though she had only picked the tile. The art on the walls, the imported clay pots, the velvet bar stools, all carefully curated for her image. And all under my name. Or rather, under Holding Entity X. She just didn't know it yet. She ran upstairs, opened the bedroom closet. Her side was overflowing with designer luggage, most of which still had tags. For show. She yanked one down, unzipped it, then paused mid-pack. The gate. She dropped the bag and sprinted to the garage, barefoot, almost slipping on the polished concrete. Hit the remote for the gate. Nothing. Pressed it again, then held it. The LED light blinked red. She jumped into her car and tried the gate manually through the touchscreen in her dash, something I'd custom installed for her ease of access. She had called it my luxury cockpit. The screen froze. Then flashed a message. Access revoked. Contact property management. Her fingers hovered over the steering wheel. Her mouth opened like she might scream, but no sound came out. The gate stared back at her, perfectly still. She punched the dash. Tried calling her father again. What do I do? He was already in his car, speeding through the mountain roads, trying to reach her before the full lockdown completed. But he was too late. The system was automated. It wasn't just the gate. It was the whole perimeter. Every camera, sensor, backup generator, key code. All reset. All logged. All legally executed per the document she signed while sipping limoncello and joking about legal fluff. She stepped out of the car and looked up at the cameras. For the first time, they didn't feel like her security system. They felt like eyes. Watching. Recording. Her father's voice in her ear. This isn't a threat. It's already done. She backed away from the gate slowly, like it might attack. Then turned and walked back toward the house. Every step felt heavier. Every window she passed looked darker than it had yesterday. She finally understood. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a bluff. She didn't trigger a warning. She triggered the end. And the house she'd once stood in front of for Instagram photos, the one she told her friends was part of her identity, it wasn't hers anymore. It never was. She returned to the gate 10 minutes later, dressed like it was still her property. Oversized sunglasses, cashmere wrap, heels clicking too fast against the pavers. There was a sharpness in her step, like confidence forced into a tight-fitting dress. But the gate didn't care. It stayed shut. Waiting for her were two men in black polos with the Parallax Holdings logo stitched discreetly over the chest. They weren't the usual guys from our local private patrol service. These men looked like they were trained for something much harder than community watch. Arms folded. No visible weapons. But you didn't need to see them to know they were trained to end conversations fast. Ma'am, one said. Polite. Firm. Per the activation of Clause 1.1, this estate is now under the exclusive management of Parallax Holdings. We're instructed not to allow entry to any unauthorized parties. She took off her sunglasses like that would help. This is my house. My name is on. Ma'am, he repeated, still calm. You are not listed on the updated title. All access is managed through the holding company. Any disputes must be submitted through your counsel. My counsel, she snapped. My counsel. Oh, I have counsel. And he's going to have your job, your license, and whatever power-hungry idiot gave you this script. She reached for her phone again. Still no answer from me. Then she called again, this time through her favorites shortcut. Still voicemail. Again. Again. Her father's car screeched to a stop on the side road. He'd taken the long way around the back, trying to access the secondary drive. It was sealed, too. Guarded. Logged. He got out, looked around wildly, waving his phone in the air like the reception was the problem. I'd watched him pace that driveway once before, 10 years ago, when he begged me to stay with her after one of her episodes. I remembered thinking then how much quieter the world was when he had nothing left to threaten me with. And now, here he was again, spinning in circles, looking for cracks in a wall that didn't exist. I want to speak to the owner, she shouted at the guard. You can submit a formal request through the portal, he replied. But as of this morning, you are classified as a non-resident. We are not authorized to escalate further unless the request is initiated by the account holder. I am the goddamn account holder. Respectfully, the guard said. You are not. She screamed then, loud, primal, like something feral had been cornered. Her father rushed to her side, pulling her back by the arm. She jerked away. Do something, she hissed. He looked at her, then at the guards, then at the house barely visible behind the oak trees. I warned you, he muttered. I told you not to file first. Not before reading. Oh, shut up, she snapped. You told me he'd fold. That he'd cave, like every other man I've dealt with. You said he was weak. He didn't respond. He just stared at the gate. And then the silence set in. Not just between them, but around them. The kind of silence that feels like the beginning of something permanent. No more leverage. No more calls to make. Her phone had become useless. My voicemail message, you've reached a number that no longer accepts calls from this line, was my own small punctuation mark. She kicked the gate. Hard. Twice. It didn't budge. I watched the entire scene unfold from a camera feed in my office downtown. I didn't need to be there. Everything was already in motion. The system we'd built wasn't designed for negotiation. It was designed for protection. I didn't activate it out of spite. I activated it out of principle. Because she treated permanence like it was an illusion and trust like a poker chip. She gambled. She lost. The guards eventually walked back to their post, leaving her and her father standing on the road like trespassers. She dialed again. Not me this time. Her lawyer. He picked up. I could tell from the way her shoulders dropped. Her voice softened, and her posture shifted. That was her save me tone. But he didn't say what she wanted to hear. She stopped mid-sentence, face hardening. She looked back at the gate like she was trying to break it with her eyes. Then she said one word I never thought I'd hear from her lips. Please. But the gate didn't recognize please. The gate only responded to access codes. She was now a visitor. A woman yelling at her own reflection in tinted glass, begging for re-entry into a life she never respected. And the clock kept ticking. 20 hours and 16 minutes left. The email hit her inbox at exactly 2:03 p.m. Subject line. Transfer confirmation, escrow finalized. She clicked it so fast she accidentally opened it twice. At first, she didn't understand what she was reading. Her eyes scanned the bolded words without processing them, like someone trying to read a foreign language by brute force. And then, piece by piece, the reality began to click into place. Parcel #001, NW, 1.7-acre residential lot. Ownership reassigned to holding entity X. Parcel #002, SE, guest home and studio, reassigned. Licensing rights for vacation rentals, reassigned. Mineral rights, reassigned. All furniture, fixtures, and assets not documented under personal property exemption, reassigned. Every line was another nail. Every timestamp was another sealed door. And the signature at the bottom wasn't mine. It was the escrow officer's. That's what really got her. She was used to everything being personal, fights, apologies, manipulation. This wasn't personal. This was mechanical, legal, clinical. She called her lawyer. He answered on the first ring this time. There was no small talk. I told you not to file yet, he said, voice flat. I said we should go through the trust language line by line before making a move. You didn't say it like it mattered, she snapped. I said it precisely the way I always do when a client is about to set themselves on fire. I didn't yell, Natalie, because I'm a lawyer, not a life coach. I gave you advice. You overruled it. Now you're here. She paced her hotel room. She'd booked it that morning just for a night. assuming this whole thing would blow over by dinner. He'll calm down once I talk to him, she told her dad. He's sensitive, but not stupid. That was before the email, before the recorded document timestamps, before the courier arrived with the printed version, hand-delivered, signature required, a receipt she now held like a brick in her lap. The door buzzed at 7:12 p.m. She opened it to find a polite woman with a clipboard and 3 men in gray uniforms behind her. The side of the truck read, Titan Relocation Logistics. Below it, in smaller text, by authorization only. Ms. Rhodes? The woman asked. She didn't answer. We're here under authorization of Parallax Holdings. We're tasked with facilitating the one-time supervised retrieval of non-trust governed personal items. Jewelry, clothes, medical records, laptops, anything not affixed or registered to the estate. Natalie blinked. I never gave. The request was submitted by the registered controller of Holding Entity X, the woman said, flipping the clipboard, and co-approved through escrow channels. You're entitled to be present while our team collects the items, but only the items on this list. She handed her a printed sheet. There were 19 items. Everything else, everything she had touched, designed, color-coordinated, posted about, and called hers, was locked under the trust. She stood frozen in the doorway for a moment, then stepped aside without a word. The team entered like a ghostly ballet. No chaos, no noise. They moved through her past life with eerie calm, scanning barcodes, tagging suitcases, photographing rooms. Every movement logged, every decision recorded. Not for me, but for compliance. That was the worst part. It wasn't me rubbing salt in the wound. It was procedure. Indifferent. Precise. At 8:41 p.m., the lead mover approached her holding a white leather jewelry box. This wasn't on the approved list, he said. Do you want to request evaluation? She stared at the box. Inside were the cufflinks she'd given me on our 2nd anniversary. The box had been sitting on my side of the closet for years. No, she muttered. Leave it. Understood. They tagged it and set it aside. When it was over, the woman with the clipboard handed her a final document. This certifies the chain of custody documentation for the retrieval process, she said. All video logs will be retained for 60 days per company policy. If you'd like a copy of your personal inventory, here's a QR code. She nodded blankly, and then the door closed. Natalie stood there in the hotel room, surrounded by 3 designer suitcases, a cosmetic bag, and a laptop she never actually used. The rest of her life, her curated fantasy, was now locked inside a house she couldn't enter, guarded by a company she'd never heard of before yesterday. The realization wasn't loud. It didn't come with a scream or a crash. It came in the form of a white noise that settled in the space where certainty used to live, where power once thrived. She sat down on the edge of the bed, the suitcase zippers still half open, her hands limp in her lap. Her father texted, "Anything recovered?" She didn't reply. The next message, "I'm calling a friend. He might know someone in corporate arbitration." She turned off the screen, because it finally hit her. This wasn't arbitration. This was a verdict. Already delivered. Already executed. And the sentence wasn't prison. It was exile. He showed up just before midnight, headlights cutting through the long gravel drive like a last-ditch prayer slicing through fog. I saw him on the monitor long before he rang the bell. He didn't even try the gate this time. He parked outside the perimeter and walked the quarter-mile in. No umbrella. No coat. Just a blazer, slung over his shoulder like this was some late-night college reunion, like we were equals. Like we hadn't already crossed the point where words could do anything but echo. I let him in, not out of civility, but because I wanted him to see it with his own eyes. I wanted him to stand in the belly of the thing he'd once called a smart little investment hedge and realize the building was now a vault, and he'd locked his daughter out of it with his own encouragement. He stepped into the foyer, blinking at the lights. The room had changed since his last visit. Bare walls. No photos. No trinkets. Nothing of hers. The place didn't feel hollow. It felt clean. Sanitized. Like memory had been professionally removed. He didn't sit. Just stood there, shifting weight from one expensive loafer to the other, like maybe if he rocked long enough the ground would forgive him. I know what this looks like, he said finally, voice tight. But there's got to be a line. Somewhere. You don't do this to family. I looked at him. Took a long, quiet breath. She stopped being family the moment she weaponized the foundation I built. She was hurt, he snapped. She felt trapped. Maybe she said some things, made some mistakes. Hell, we all do. She didn't make a mistake, I replied. She filed. That's not a stumble. That's a choice. He rubbed his forehead. The exact same gesture she uses when she's losing an argument. Genetics are cruel that way. I was there when you built this, he said. Don't you remember? I helped introduce you to your first investor. Yes, I said. And I remember how you tried to renegotiate the equity split after the term sheet was signed. You always believed everything was flexible. Everything could be leaned on. That's not fair, he muttered. No, I said. It's not. But it's accurate. He walked slowly to the center of the room, eyes scanning the bare mantel. His daughter's absence hung in the air like the scent of a candle just blown out. He cleared his throat. This isn't what your mother would have wanted, he said quietly. There it was. The trump card. Her ghost. Her voice invoked like a shield. I stepped closer, looked him dead in the eye. My mother, I said, read every contract she ever signed, including the prenup she rewrote 3 times to protect me from people exactly like your daughter. He flinched. A real one. Not the performative kind he used in boardrooms. The real kind, small, involuntary, revealing. She believed in people, I added. But she prepared for them, too. He broke eye contact first. You don't have to burn it all down, he said softly. You've made your point. She's lost. We all have. You think this is about fire? I asked. This is about structure. She dismantled something sacred and expected applause. Now she gets to watch what happens when foundations fight back. He let out a shaky breath, stepping back. You're not who I thought you were. No, I said. I'm exactly who I told you I was. You just thought I was bluffing. Silence swallowed the room. He took a long look around one last time. At the walls, the stonework, the design he once called wasteful but impressive. All of it. Now under the seal of a holding company with no face and no sentiment. She's alone, he said, not even bothering to hide the shake in his voice. She chose that, I said. He looked at me again, but this time without the false confidence. Just a tired old man watching the consequences of arrogance come home to roost. You really won't let her back in? I didn't respond. I just handed him a copy of the document she signed. He took it, eyes scanning the first page. The clause. The timestamp. The irrevocable nature of the transfer. This can't be reversed. No, I said. But it can be remembered. He stood there holding the paper like it was an obituary. Then he turned to leave. No handshake. No final argument. Just silence and the sound of his footsteps retreating across tile. At the door, he paused one last time, back still to me. I always thought you were the safe one, he said. The boring one. The fallback. I let that hang. Then I said, without a hint of heat. And that's why I won. He walked into the night without looking back. And just like that, the last person who could have changed anything finally understood. This wasn't revenge. This was architecture. She was sitting in the hotel lobby when the photo hit her phone. No caption. Just a single image sent by a friend she hadn't heard from in weeks. One of those people who secretly hated her, but stayed close for the social perks. It showed the front gate of the estate. Or what used to be the front gate. The wrought iron arch that once held her family's name now stood bare. The plaque was gone. In its place, a white banner zip-tied between the posts. Red block letters. For sale, private bidding only. Inquire. Parallax Holdings Development Division. She stared at the photo for a full 30 seconds before reacting. Her iced coffee, untouched, was sweating onto a paper napkin. The spa manager behind the desk was still asking her if she wanted to confirm her massage at 10:15. She didn't hear a word. At dawn, just hours before, surveyor trucks had rolled onto the property. White pickups, hazard lights flashing, tripods slung in the backs like hunting rifles. One by one, they fanned out across the land. Over the garden trail she used to jog, the hillside with the overhyped wine cave, the gravel driveway lined with imported cypress trees. The land she had called her retreat. Her sanctuary. Her brand. Now, a grid. Each tree was tagged. Every outbuilding labeled. By noon, the fence posts were marked with fluorescent flags. Blue for power, red for boundaries, yellow for water lines. It looked like the beginning of something, and the end of everything. My company had signed the intent to purchase weeks ago, long before she filed, before she laughed by the fire, before she made the mistake of thinking I was still trying to win her. She didn't understand the timeline. She thought this had started when she filed. It hadn't. It started 2 years ago, when she told me, with her signature smugness, that she wanted to live somewhere that felt more permanent. I asked her to define permanent. She said, mine. That's when I started writing clauses. Back at the hotel, she finally responded to the message with the photo. This is a joke, right? No reply. She refreshed the Parallax Holdings site. The estate had its own section now. Parcel 17. No address listed. No photos. Just a blurb. Multi-use private property with scenic potential and flexible zoning. Initial bids restricted to verified private investors. The name Rhodes appeared nowhere. Her call to the escrow office bounced to voicemail. She called her father next. Straight to voicemail. Then she tried me. Of course. My phone didn't ring. She was flagged. I'd set that up weeks ago too. Meanwhile, on site, the lead developer walked the perimeter with a tablet and a Leica scanner, recording every inch. He'd made a comment to one of the guards earlier, something about the land being untapped premium. Said it was shocking no one had tried to subdivide it earlier. Owner must have been sentimental, he'd laughed. Not sentimental, just strategic. A security contractor escorted him to the edge of what used to be the reflecting pool. He pointed to a slope and said, "That's where the overlooked deck would go," then gestured toward the woods. Private spa there. Boutique cabins through the tree line. If we time it right, first buyers could be in by next fall. They spoke in square footage, in renderings, in margin potential. Not once did they mention her name. She arrived around 2 p.m. uninvited. Drove right up to the security checkpoint in a different car. Rented. She told the guard she was there for family reasons. Showed a photo of herself in front of the house. One of those overly filtered ones she used to post with hashtags like hashtag blessed retreat and hashtag my sanctuary. The guard scanned the photo, then looked at her. "I'm sorry, ma'am. This is an active development zone. You'll need an appointment and verified investor credentials to be on site." "I lived here," she said, voice trembling. "You don't understand." I do understand," the guard said. "That's why I can't let you in." She sat in the car for 20 minutes after that. Just sat, hands gripping the steering wheel. At one point, she opened the glove box like she was looking for something, then slammed it shut. And then the disbelief turned into something else. Something worse. Numbness. Not anger. Not yet. That would come later. This was the stage where the brain starts detaching to protect the heart. She watched a backhoe roll past, its treads chewing through gravel she once had imported from some overpriced quarry in Arizona. The sound was deafening, but she didn't cover her ears. Because there's no defense against reality. Only delay. And for her, the delay had expired. She was sitting in a conference room that wasn't hers. Neutral territory, her attorney called it. Some sterile rental suite in a co-working space downtown. Designed for mediations that never really mediate anything. The walls were gray. Not sleek, modern gray, but dull, dusty, and of options gray. A single pitcher of water sat between them, untouched. No coffee. No charm. Just consequence. She hadn't said much all day. Her father hadn't shown. The developer wouldn't take her calls. And Parallax Holdings' legal team had responded to her emergency petition with a one-sentence reply. The terms of the trust remain immutable per original charter, Section 1.0 and Addendum 1.3. She read it 5 times, hoping the language would change if she blinked enough. Now her lawyer sat across from her, elbows on the table, tie loosened. Not in sympathy, just fatigue. She'd spent the last 2 weeks barking at him, demanding more options, more aggression, more something, and now, here they were. The end of the line. And even he had stopped pretending there was a detour. "I need you to tell me," she said quietly, voice fraying. "Just tell me how we undo this." He didn't answer right away. He opened a folder. Page 1. The clause. The signature. Her handwriting. He slid it across the table. Initiation by spouse results in immediate forfeiture of all trust-governed assets. Effective within 24 hours of filing. She stared at the document like it had just materialized. Like it hadn't been sitting inside her own binder for years. Ignored. Labeled miscellaneous legal. His stuff. Did he add this later?" she asked. Quietly. "Without telling me." "No." The lawyer replied, matter of fact. "It was always there. You initialed every page. We confirmed that during discovery." She looked down at her own signature, that little loop in her capital N. "I thought it was fluff," she whispered. He didn't reply. What could he say? Her breathing picked up, shallow and fast. "We can fight this," she said, almost to herself. "He can't just lock me out. He can't turn my life into a transaction." "He didn't," her lawyer said. "You did." Her eyes snapped up. "You filed." "Not him. You pulled the trigger that set off the clause." "I didn't know it was real." "That doesn't matter." He closed the folder. Slowly, like a coroner zipping a body bag. "There's no room to appeal," he added. "No ambiguity. The trust is private. It's self-executing. He spent years designing this to be bulletproof. I want to go to court anyway." "And say what?" he asked. "That your husband honored the exact document you signed?" She was trembling now. There has to be something. A loophole. A delay in the filing, a technicality. There's nothing. We've checked. 3 times. She wiped under her eye. Not a tear yet. Just the panic that comes right before one. That desperate scrambling in the brain to reverse a decision, to undo a moment, to unfile the document you smugly handed over thinking you'd be holding all the cards. You told me we'd have leverage, she said. I told you to wait, he shot back. To read it. You told me, and I quote, he's too boring to win. She went silent. I didn't think he had it in him, she mumbled. Well, he said, standing, gathering his things. Apparently, he had it in him the whole time. You just weren't paying attention. He reached for his coat, then paused, looked at her, really looked at her. Do you know what he said when we reached out yesterday? He asked. She didn't answer. He said nothing. He had his firm send over a statement that read, quote, all terms executed as agreed. No further communication necessary. She shut her eyes, as if darkness could soften the blow. Her lawyer walked to the door, opened it, then turned one last time. You laughed when he built it, he said, not unkindly. But he was building your exit. Then he was gone. She stayed in that chair for an hour, maybe more. She didn't cry. Not at first. She just sat there, like someone in the wreckage of a house who doesn't know if they're alive or dead yet. The grief hadn't even fully arrived. It was still circling, waiting for the last traces of denial to evaporate. When it came, it wasn't loud. It didn't sound like sobbing. It sounded like air leaving a room, like pressure collapsing. She buried her face in her hands. And for the first time, truly, she understood. He hadn't just written her out. He had written her exit. They gave her 60 minutes. 1 hour. Not negotiable. A single supervised return to the place she used to rule like a queen. A place that once echoed with her curated laugh, her spa playlist, the clink of wine glasses and the cadence of her voice rehearsing how she'd introduce herself to real investors. Now it was quiet. Not hushed. Vacant. She arrived alone this time. Her father refused to ride in the same car. He followed behind in silence, parking at the edge of the driveway and staying in the vehicle for a few minutes before finally stepping out, hands in his pockets, jaw locked tight. He refused to meet the eyes of the security team stationed at the front entrance. Not because he didn't want to, because he couldn't. She stood at the gate like someone approaching a casket. The guards nodded, polite but indifferent. The lead one checked her name against the approved access list, then glanced at the time. Your window starts now, he said, tapping his watch. 1 hour. She stepped through the door like she was entering a stranger's home. Every echo inside fell off, like the acoustics had changed. Or maybe they hadn't. Maybe she just never really listened to silence before. The entry table, gone. The orchid she used to photograph with captions like fresh starts and fresh blooms. Gone. Only the fixtures remained, cold, untouchable. She reached out and ran her fingers along the wall where the gallery of vacation photos once hung. Nothing was there. Not even the nail holes. Patched. Painted. Erased. She walked slowly. Her heels clicked on the hardwood in a rhythm that sounded too sharp now. Upstairs, the bedroom looked like a hotel suite after checkout. Clean. Precise. Stripped of any soul. The vanity was bare. The jewelry drawer removed. Even the scented candle collection she used to brag about, hand-poured in Milan, was gone. She opened the closet. The only items left were the ones on her retrieval list. 3 dresses, 2 pairs of shoes, a laptop, a single coat. Everything else, gone. Logged. Cataloged. Either retained as trust-governed assets or discarded per property, Clause 7.2. Items deemed decorative or co-owned shall not be recoverable. That clause had seemed like overkill when her attorney reviewed it years ago. Now it felt surgical. She walked into the kitchen and opened a cabinet out of muscle memory. Empty. Even the espresso mugs were gone. She checked the wine fridge. Empty. The kitchen island? Cleared. No fruit bowl. No wine rack. No handwritten sticky notes on the fridge with affirmations about manifesting abundance. Just bare granite. Cold as stone. In the living room, she found one chair. One. It was the one she hated, the scratchy green armchair I refused to throw out. She called it ugly grandpa furniture. I left it there for a reason. It was the only thing in that house she hadn't chosen. She sat in it, not because she was tired, because she had nowhere else to sit. Outside, her father paced. Not once did he look through the window. Not once did he speak to the guards or dial a number. He just walked, like an old man trying to stay busy while the rest of his world collapsed. She pulled out her phone, checked her messages. Nothing. The group chats she used to dominate had gone quiet. The 2 friends she called for emergency cocktails hadn't responded in days. She scrolled through her contacts and saw rows of names that now felt irrelevant. Contacts curated for a lifestyle that no longer existed. Then, with 15 minutes left, she walked into the guest room. It still smelled like linen and eucalyptus. That room had been her pride, the Airbnb suite, she used to joke. The last time we had guests, she'd staged it like a magazine spread. She said she liked creating a vibe. There was no vibe now, just empty drawers. A folded towel, the memory of things. She stared at the window. You could see the hills from there, the ones she used to point to when pretending she understood property lines. She once told her friends, "We own everything the sun touches." Now she owned nothing but the clothes in her bag and a silence too thick to escape. One of the guards appeared in the hallway. 5 minutes, he said. She nodded. In the last few minutes, she wandered into the garage, stood in front of the wall where my old tools used to hang. The pegboard was still there. Empty hooks. No hammer. No screwdrivers. No meaning. She whispered something to herself. Not a prayer. Just a sound. Like breath collapsing. Then she walked back through the foyer and stepped outside. Her father was leaning against the car now, arms crossed. He didn't look up. She paused on the threshold, turned around, and glanced one last time at the door. But there was no key, no memory, no rescue, just the sound of the lock clicking shut behind her. And for the first time, she didn't feel angry. She felt erased. The ballroom was over-designed, all champagne marble and unnecessary chandeliers, the kind of place built to intimidate people who already knew they were outclassed. The auction was invite-only, private bidding only, vetted investors only. No press, no photos, no drama, except for the one kind that mattered. The estate was lot number 19. They didn't call it by its name because it didn't have one anymore, just coordinates and acreage. The description was clinical: premier hillside parcel with multi-use zoning, panoramic views, and direct access to private roads. Pre-cleared for residential and commercial development. I stood on the second-floor balcony with a bourbon in hand, watching the scene unfold below through blackened glass. The crowd was as I expected, a mix of bored developers, sharp-suited fund managers, and trust fund heirs pretending to be deal-makers. All holding tablets. All pretending they hadn't already made their decisions before the night even started. The auctioneer was a woman with a voice like gravel and velvet. She spoke in numbers and legal terms. No poetry, no sentiment, just phrases like escalator clause, site-specific allowances, and sealed bids submitted under pre-negotiated conditions. Lot number 19 opened at $8.2 million. 5 hands went up. Within minutes, 2 dropped out. Then one more. It came down to 2 bidders. One was a real estate tech startup trying to reposition itself as a lifestyle brand. The other was a legacy foundation, ironically, one that my wife had spent months trying to woo last year. She'd invited their board members to private dinners, gifted them rare bottles of wine, even hosted a charity event in their honor, hoping they'd recognize her as one of them. They didn't. Now they were about to own everything she once used to impress them. When the final bid was accepted, $10.4 million, clean escrow, the auctioneer's gavel hit the podium with a soft, definitive thud. There was no applause, just murmurs of satisfaction and the sound of dealmakers moving on to the next conquest. But down on the floor, 2 people hadn't moved. She stood near the back wall, arms crossed, face pale but carefully composed. The designer bag on her arm was older than it looked, worn at the seams from being clutched too tightly these past few weeks. Her hair was still perfect, her posture still rehearsed. But her eyes were searching for a crack in a wall that had been sealed shut long before she ever noticed it was being built. Her father walked in late, disheveled, uncharacteristically so. He scanned the crowd, expecting to see someone he could shake down, charm, threaten. Then his eyes rose to the balcony and found me. He froze. The recognition hit him first, then the realization. He turned to her, grabbed her arm, not roughly, but firmly, and leaned in. I couldn't hear the words from behind the glass, but I could read lips. He never needed to crawl back, he said. Then his eyes flicked toward the auctioneer, now confirming the paperwork with the winning bidder. He planned this from the start. She said nothing, didn't nod, didn't flinch, just stood there, absorbing the final blow in a slow, breathless exhale. Not of pain, not of defeat, of understanding. This wasn't just about a house, or land, or even money. This was about architecture, a blueprint of consequences that began the moment she mistook silence for softness. She had always assumed I was boring, predictable, calculated in the most tedious sense. She'd built her exit around that assumption. And now she was watching that assumption stand over her like a monument. The foundation's director shook the auctioneer's hand. Outside, trucks were already lining up to take possession of the property by week's end. New development teams, new renderings, new vision. Nothing she touched would remain. She left without a word. Her father trailed behind, looking older than he had a week ago, smaller somehow. They walked through the lobby like ghosts late to their own funeral. I stayed on the balcony, finished my drink, and left the empty glass on the ledge. The view was better from here.